My name is Thomas. I'm 51. And to be honest, I've never believed in mysticism. No UFOs, no ghosts, no light at the end of the tunnel. I have always believed that all this is an attempt by the mind to survive in the face of chaos. But that was before the accident. January 18th, somewhere near Savannah, Georgia. Rain. A scooter. One truck that didn't see me at the intersection. Hit. And silence. They say that before death a person sees his whole life. I only saw the moment when I told my daughter that I would not come to her concert. That moment was like a lifetime. It grew, overshadowed everything else. I tried to push him away. And at that moment, the fall began. At first I thought it was a dream. The darkness is like an abyss. No tunnel, no angels. Just the feeling that I'm in a place where time didn't just stop, it never started. There was no floor, no sky, no smell. But I could feel the eyes on me. Observation. And that's when she came along. Light is not like a lantern, not like the sun. It's like a memory of warmth that you once knew but forgot. A woman stood in the light. A white dress, light as if woven from clouds. Short blonde haircut. And a smile sad and calm at the same time. "Hello, Thomas," she said. The voice is like the voice of the sister you never had. I froze. Because I knew who she was. "Are you Princess Diana?" She nodded. Not with pride. With regret. "You're not dead," she said. "But you're lost." "Where am I?" "At the border. Between time and eternity. This is where you meet people who weren't supposed to pass, but still ended up here, even for a moment." I wanted to ask her why I couldn't see Jesus, an angel, or even my grandmother. But she spoke first. "You think you're looking for answers. But what you're really looking for is an excuse. And here you will have to choose, find out the truth, or wake up and forget." The darkness around them began to throb. Images flowed out of it, people I knew. The ones I offended. The apologies I never asked for. I suddenly understood, it's not a bad dream. This is parsing. Me. And there was a woman who the whole world knew as a symbol of compassion, but here, she was the judge, but she didn't judge. It reflected. "Why are you here?" I whispered. She replied. "Because I also went through the limit. But not where everyone thought it was going. Peace is not an automatic reward. Light is not just about comfort. Sometimes, it's a flame." I could feel her words tearing at something inside me. It was as if my soul no longer fit inside me. And she said, "You are allowed to return. But when you wake up, you won't remember everything. Only things that will change your heart. If you reject it, we will meet again. But in a different role." I held out my hand not to her, but to the light beyond. And he said, "I don't want to forget." She nodded. "Then don't remember the names. Remember the feeling." And I woke up. In the ward. With a tube in his throat. A crying daughter at the head of the bed. And there was a silence in my chest that sounded like something bigger than me. On the third day after I woke up, I was transferred to a regular ward. I didn't feel any pain, even though the doctors said I shouldn't have woken up in that state at all. One of them joked that I was a miracle with a motor. But I wasn't in the mood for jokes. I didn't feel like the same person anymore. More precisely, I felt that that person was still there, in that place without time. It all started with mirrors. When I first got up from my hospital bed and went to the washstand, I caught a look, not my own. It was mine, the same color, the same age. But not the expression. He was aware. It was as if something was looking through me, surprised to be here again. The next morning, there was a pause in the mirror. Do you know that feeling when you look at your reflection and for a split second it feels like it's lagging behind? That's how it was. But not for a second, but for a long time. 3 or 4 seconds. I blinked, and the reflection blinked a little later. I told the nurse. She suggested a psychologist. I agreed. Dr. Peters was patient, silent. She kept her hands folded in her lap, as if she were praying, but without God. When I told her about the woman in white, about that strange place, about what she said, she didn't interrupt. I asked, "How did you feel when she spoke about the truth?" "Fear," I said. "But not for myself. For everything." She nodded, as if that was what she'd expected. "You will dream of the light," she said softly. "It will come not as a rescue, but as a question." I froze. "How do you know that?" She just looked at me. And in her pupils I saw a pulsing white circle, like that woman's, like Diana's. Last night I dreamed of a train station. Old, deserted. The trains were motionless, but none of them were moving. I was alone. Until I heard footsteps. A female figure in the distance, not in white. In black. I shouted, "Diana?" She didn't answer. I ran to her. But she was gone, as if she were a shadow in the snow. There was a note on the floor. One line written in my own handwriting. "Don't forget who picks the side when it all starts." I woke up in a cold sweat. The same thing was written on the wall of the ward. Someone or something had scratched the words into the white paint. In the morning, I had 4 hanging over my bed. Inside is not a cure. Just water. The nurse, after checking the composition, turned pale. "It's not from our drugstore," she whispered. "It shouldn't be here." I looked at the drop that was trickling down the tube. It reflected the room inside, but it was empty. Without me. Then I understood. I'm back, but not completely. And they know it. I checked out a week later. Outside, the sun was bright and harmless. People lived ordinary lives. But I'm not. I felt throbbing. Under the skin, in the air, in the sounds. It was as if the world was something alive, and his heart was beating wildly. Like a glitch. For the first few days at home, I didn't get much sleep. I sat in silence and listened to silence. Because even she sounded different now. On the 4th day, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. It was just lying on the doormat. On plain paper, only 2 phrases. "You're not alone. Find Marcus." I didn't know a single Marcus. But inside, I knew the letter was real. I started looking. Near-death experience forums, Reddits, and groups with names like Between and Transition. 5 days later, I found it. Marcus Levy. 46 years old. A programmer from Seattle. I had an accident a year ago. Spent 4 minutes in clinical death. After that, he disappeared from the internet, work, and family. Except for one thing. He started posting strange posts on an abandoned blog. Almost no one read them, because no one understood them. I read each one. The one who hears the soft call has been there. The person who answers is no longer quite human. We are not the chosen ones. We are the missed ones. Light is deceptive. He's like a mirror. You look, you see the truth. But not my own. It's the one they want to feed you. They're watching. In reflections. In the neon light. In the faces in the crowd. Don't pray out loud. They hear loud things. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. I was found. Tomorrow code 3-5-7-0. If you're just like me, remember the face of the one who doesn't breathe but speaks. It didn't surprise me that I received another email the next day. Same handwriting. The same white sheet. 3-5-7-0 bus stop, Bayview area. Today. Midnight. I went. Midnight. Drizzle. The bus was not running at this time. The area was asleep. There was a man sitting at the bus stop, stooped, a scar across the right eyebrow. In his hands is an old Walkman. He raised his head, and I knew it was Marcus. But his eyes, they were too black. Not like a human. Like water in a well at night. The depth where something was moving. He spoke. Mute. The lips moved, but the air was dead. I read his lips. They're on their way. You have less time left than you think. And then everything froze. The car stopped. The wind was gone. Even the raindrops were suspended in the air. And in the silence, I heard what I was most afraid of. Steps. A lot. Slow ones. Uniform values. Too smooth for humans. I turned around and they were already there. People. But not alive. Their faces were unfinished. Like mannequins who have forgotten to draw an expression. They just stood there. And watched. On me. And at Marcus. Marcus whispered. You're in the game now. And you're the key. Think of the woman in white. Remember what she didn't say. He stood up. And I went right into them. Disappeared. Disappeared. I was left alone. And I understood. Whatever I discovered in the dark, it woke up. And it came for me. I left home the next morning. I didn't know if the people at the bus stop were looking for me. But the dreams were worse than the meeting itself. Now they came there too. And each time closer. I rented a motel room on the outskirts of Tacoma. An old building that smelled of mildew and cigarettes, where the walls were paper-thin and the rooms were barely locked. And it was in this place that I first heard whispers through the mirror. It happened at night when I was brushing my teeth. The mirror shuddered, not physically, but as if a shadow had passed in a wave, but not outside, but inside the glass. And I heard. You're not sleeping. So you see. Don't turn away. Watch this. There was a figure in the reflection behind me. Thin as a twig. Leaning in, as if listening to my mind, not my words. I didn't turn around. Instead, I blinked. And she was gone. But in that moment, I realized. Reflections are not about us. It's about them. The next day, I went to the library to look for references to people who had experienced similar experiences. Not in articles, but in diaries. In documents that are not looking for fame, but just trying not to go crazy. I found one name, Emma Sloan. She was a hospice nurse upstate. She died in 1986. But before that, she left notes written by hand, found only in 2021, during the reconstruction of the archive. The notes were strange, confused, but some phrases were correct. The dead don't go away. This is a lie. They become quiet. They stay because no one called them where they were going. They are denied. They are the discarded ones. They're watching. Not with hatred. With envy. I printed out the pages, brought them to the motel, and reread them every night. And on the third night there was a discovery. I woke up to the sound of breathing. Heavy, slow. But the room was empty. Only on the floor, wet traces of bare feet. Leading out of the bathroom in the mirror. I leaned closer. And I didn't see myself in the reflection. I saw the scene, as if through a window. An empty kitchen. Clock on the wall. Girl sitting, drawing. Next to it is a woman. An elderly woman. He holds out his hand to her. At that moment, the woman turned. Straight to me. And she whispered with her lips, not her voice. We didn't leave. We just weren't allowed in. The scene disappeared. I was alone. And I understood. The dead don't rest. They're waiting. There are millions of them. Maybe more. Forgotten, uninvited, improperly buried, ridiculed, condemned. Not sinners. Not saints. Left ones. That evening, I noticed a man in the motel hallway. He was standing by the window, his back to me. He was wearing an old pair of hospital pajamas. And there was a note in his hand. He didn't move. I just stared into the darkness. I walked over. He didn't turn around. I took the note from his hand. You were there. You saw that you shouldn't have. They remember you now. They will want to enter through you. Are you ready to be the door? I turned around to ask a question. But the man was gone. Like evaporation. Like a thought. Like a memory that isn't yours. And then I realized that I wasn't chosen because I was worthy. It's because I'm cracked. And now something that should never have come back is seeping through that crack. On the 5th day at the motel, I started hearing the floor creak when no one was walking. It wasn't imagination. They matched up with spiders, which suddenly became too numerous. They were coming out of their sockets. From under the carpet. From the sink. No buzzing. They didn't move in panic. Just watching. That night I dreamed about my father. He died when I was 9. But in the dream, he was standing at the window of my childhood. Same sweater. The same gray hair. But his eyes were empty. Like glass. And he said, "We are no longer part of the world. We are in between. And you're with us." I woke up. The motel window was open. I did lock it, though. There are fingerprints on the windowsill, small as a child's. I left the next day. I took the first bus to Seattle. It didn't matter where, it was important to get out of there. But even among the people, in the city, I felt that they were coming. Not for the body, but for the mind. I went into the cafe, hoping for safety, for noise, for normalcy. And I saw her. The woman at the next table. He looked to be in his mid-40s. She was wearing a medical uniform and had a badge on her chest, Rachel, RN. She stared at the phone without blinking. Without moving. The fingers were slightly bent, as if frozen in motion. I do not know why I was looking at her so intently. Maybe a shadow over her shoulder that doesn't match the light. Maybe it was the way the phone screen didn't reflect in her eyes. Then suddenly she whispered. I can hear them. They whisper through others. Through those who weaken. They copy thoughts, feelings, and smells. They're looking for a body. I wasn't sure if she was talking to me. But then she looked up. And I saw another woman in them. Completely different. Older. With a haggard face. Eyes that didn't have an eyelid in them, just darkness like a tunnel. And she spoke in a different voice. You will break through the veil. Or it will tear you apart. And the next second, Rachel leaned back. Then she screamed. Wild as an animal. Everyone in the cafe jumped up. But when I turned around, no one saw her. She was gone. Like I've never sat there before. And no one but me even noticed her. I ran out into the street. He sat down on a bench. I tried to catch my breath. And then the man next to me spoke to me. He looks like a beggar. An old man in a gray coat. Eyes are closed. He said. Asterisk, the dead can now do more than before. Previously, they only knocked. Now enter. Through thoughts. Through mirrors. Through the bodies. This is not demonology. This is oblivion. They are the ones who have been forgotten. And the forgotten, as you know, is always hungry. I wanted to ask who he was. But he just said. Marcus is still alive. He hides in people. And if you don't find it first, then what's in it will find you. That night I understood. The dead are not silent. They whisper. Through us. Through the forgotten ones. Through the cracks in the mind. And if you once became a crack, you don't close anymore. Marcus. I didn't know who he was. But the name came again and again, in mirrors, in whispers, in dreams. Even the strangers on the streets, pausing for a moment as if in a flash of consciousness, spoke his name. I started with hospitals. Old ones. Half-closed ones. Archives. Finally, I found it, the Bennington Psychiatric Hospital, near Olympia. A patient named Marcus Elias Gray was registered there in 1992. The dossier is thin. But there was an entry in it. Almost invisible. Just 3 words. Speaks to the departed. When I arrived, the facility looked dilapidated. The funding ended 10 years ago. But it was still functioning, partially. Under private security. On the sign, Long-Term Surveillance Fund. I lied. He said he was a relative. The young guard in the booth didn't want to let me in for a long time. Until his eyes suddenly glazed over. And he said softly, "You came too late. Or too soon. In any case, he knows." I just clicked the button. The barrier went up. I went in. I was shown to Marcus. It wasn't as old as I expected. About 40. But in the eyes. Antiquity. It was as if he had experienced an era that he shouldn't have remembered. He was sitting in a chair, his arms crossed, his body a little too calm. But there's tension in the air. Thick, almost electric. I asked, "You're Marcus?" He looked at me. He smiled. And he said, "Not all the dead want to leave. Those who have left are forgotten. And we chose to stay. Because it's worse outside than here." I asked him who he meant by we. He leaned closer. And quietly, as if afraid that someone would hear. Those who are not afraid of oblivion. Those who have found a way to live inside the living. We are like seeds. Sown in pain, fear, loneliness. And then we grow. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to leave. But he said, "You're one of us, too, Thomas. You're dead, too. It's just that not all of them came back." I don't remember how I ended up in the hallway. The light was blinking. There was a rattling sound in the walls, as if something was going on inside the wires. Patients passed me by. Some of them are empty-eyed. Others were holding their ears and muttering. The third looked at one point and whispered, "He's coming. Through the cracks. Through the glass. Through the mind." At the exit, the guard was no longer the same. He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. And he just said, "Now they know you know." That night, I dreamed about Marcus again. He was standing at the edge of something, like an abyss, but inside himself. He was looking down. And then at me. We need more vessels. Humans are too weak to resist. But you, Thomas. You were dead. And he came back. Which means you're already a crack. And we will speak through you. I woke up in a cold sweat. On the mirror, a word written with your finger from the inside. Watch. They're not just dead. They change. They evolve. And all they need is space. Head. You. I went to Tacoma, to an old church I found in the archives, the Church of the Ascension, built in 1913. On one of the forums, I came across a post by a woman named Linda Miles. She claimed that her husband started talking to the dead after a stroke, and the priest from this church helped him, or, as she wrote, opened a gate that shouldn't have been opened. This phrase has been sitting in my head for a long time. The church was set back from the city, surrounded by dry pine trees. The facade was peeling, and the cross above the roof was cracked like lightning. It's empty inside. There was a smell of dampened wax, but no candles were burning. The icons were unnaturally dark, as if they were painted not with paint, but with shadow. And one image at the altar made me stop. It had Christ on it. But the look is not kind. Penetrating. Burning. Inhuman. And it seemed to me, for a moment, that the icon blinked. I was met by a priest, tall, gray-haired, with black eyes that didn't reflect the light. Name, Father Lawson. I told him everything. He listened in silence. And when I finished, he said, "Do you think death is a border? And if the border is not between life and death, and between awareness and discovery? And you've discovered too much, Thomas." I asked him directly, "Who's Marcus?" He sighed. He walked up to the altar. I ran my hand over the icon. He was a boy. A child born in a coma. He died at birth and came back 3 days later. After that, he didn't speak, eat, or blink again. I just watched it. And everyone who looked back began to see what he saw. I asked him where he was now. The priest leaned toward me. And he whispered, "It is in everyone who feels that someone else is inside them. He's not human. He is the message. The first crack in the glass." At that moment, the organ began to play. No one was sitting behind it, though. The music was slow, like someone was pressing keys from inside a pipe. The priest didn't blink. I wasn't afraid. He just said, "The service has begun." And then people started coming into the church. Quietly. One by one. But their faces were not theirs. Faces are like masks. Facial expressions missing. Eyes do not blink. And in each of them I recognized the face from the dream. From the mirror. From the hospital. They were all dead that ever spoke to me. And they sang. But the words were unintelligible. Not language, but feeling. Fear, thirst, call. I ran out of the church. But behind him, he heard Lawson say, "I'm not sure. You can't walk away from what's already entered you. It's just a matter of when you let it run." I didn't sleep that night. And the next morning I saw in the mirror, not my own eyes. They were darker. And it felt like someone was looking at me inside them. I started with a simple one. Diaries. Notes on your phone. Printouts that I've been collecting for months. Everything about death, near-death experiences, Marcus, the church, mirrors. All in the fire. I drove out of town to an old abandoned farm where they used to burn garbage. I put everything in an iron barrel and set it on fire. The flames shot up. And for a moment it looked like faces. Burned out ones. And yet looking. Like photos that look even without eyes. The fire hummed. It hissed. But it didn't crackle as usual. He was breathing. I stepped back. But I heard footsteps behind me. Man. Elderly. Without shoes. The clothes are like a patient's. He just stood there and stared at the fire. I asked, "You're who?" He answered without looking at me. "Ash remembers. He doesn't forget. You can burn the paper. But not something that has already been absorbed into you." I realized it was one of the men I'd seen in Bennington. The one who muttered about cracks. His skin was ash gray now. And his lips moved, but made no sound. But I heard it. In my head. "You are the bridge. You are the door. You are the vessel. And now you're part of it." I recoiled. He turned back to the car. But the windows were blackened. And on the side mirror, the inscription "with your finger. There is no going back." In a panic, I started throwing other items into the fire. A jacket where there were traces of a church. Copies of medical records. An old mirror that I always carried around with me after I first heard the voice. The fire grew. It turned black. It gave no light, only a shadow. And then, inside the flames, I saw an image. Brief as a flash, but I couldn't forget. Crowd. Hundreds. The dead. They were looking up at the sky, which was opening up like a torn canvas. And out of it, not light, but something. Huge, silent, with eyes that look in all at once. I fell to the ground, gasping for breath. And I heard the last one. You were warned. Now you're a witness. And the witnesses are not released. They transmit it. When I got home, I was covered in ash and trembling. There was a paper on the table. The one I definitely threw into the fire. There was an icon painted on it. That's the one. But now the eyes were cut out. And under the drawing. Get ready. The battle is already underway. But not on Earth. I woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound. A deep rumble, as if the earth itself was breathing. The windows shook. The clock stopped. When I looked in the mirror, I knew I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the reflection, were all of them. Marcus. The girl from the mirror. An old man without shoes. And others, whose names I didn't know, but whose eyes I saw in every dream. They didn't talk. But I heard it. Look. Remember it. Pass it. We are no longer whispering, we are calling. And then I was there. First, the void. No color. Without a form. Then a crack. And space, as in fabric. And from it, light, but not warm. Clean. The judge's office. In front of me is a field. Unlimited. And there are 2 armies on it. On the left are silhouettes, black, without faces, but with crowns of ashes. To the right were other figures, but their faces were human. Each is suffering, but burning. And in the middle is him. Jesus Christ. But not like in the books. His gaze wasn't comforting. He shared truth from lies. The living comes from the dead. Light from those who pretended to have it in them. And then I saw that it wasn't the church that took the side of the world. Not righteous in the world. And those who broke down. Who fell and got up. Who cried, but did not betray. And those who stood in crowns of ashes, many of them were familiar. Priests. Teachers. People with smiles on their faces. But with a void underneath them. Jesus raised his hand. And at that moment, I heard something inside me, not a voice. The command. Tell me. Right. They need to know. Before returning, it will be the other way around. Lying will become the norm. Light will appear suspicious. And those who tell the truth will be burned out. But not forgotten. I returned to my body with a scream. My eyes were quivering, and my hands were burning as if I were holding a hot iron. And on the wall again a sign. The same inscription as in the mirror. There is no going back. And in that moment, I understood. I'm not a survivor. I am the sent one. I'm not writing these lines down now for the sake of sympathy. I know who you are. You've seen the cracks, too. You also feel that reality is not complete. You hear voices behind the mirror, behind the wall, half asleep. This is not an illusion. This is a call. When Christ returns, no one can pretend. You either carry the light, or you wear a disguise to hide its absence.